You're about to lose everything you've ever worked for. Your father's legacy, your dreams, gone. But wait, your only shot at saving it is teaming up with a billionaire whose dark past is directly tied to your family's ruin. Secrets are everywhere, passions run wild, and one wrong move could destroy all of it. Can Elena trust Dominic Rain, or is falling for him the biggest mistake of her life? The final twist will blow your mind. I'm your host, Josh, and it's an absolute pleasure to share this story with you. The gallery was quiet, but not the serene kind of quiet that artists dream of. No, this silence felt heavy, like the air just before a storm. A silence that swallowed potential and hope in one greedy gulp. Elena Marks paced the narrow aisles between the sculptures, her heels clicking against the wooden floor. They were a little louder than usual, partly because the place was nearly empty, and partly because she hadn't seen a paying customer all day, or all week, really. Her father's gallery, once a shining jewel of Manhattan's art scene, was now a flickering candle in a harsh wind. Elena tugged her blazer tighter around her as if shielding herself from the cold reality creeping in. She stood before a large canvas, her father's favorite, Horizon of Dreams, by an up-and-coming artist he'd discovered years ago. She stared at it, her throat tightening. The irony wasn't lost on her. Dreams. Who had time for those anymore? The gallery wasn't just a business. It was her father's legacy, the place where he'd poured his soul into the art world. After his sudden heart attack last year, Elena had vowed to keep it alive. But the New York art scene was unforgiving. Big names, shiny events, and luxury brands ruled now. It didn't matter how good the art was if you didn't have the right connections. And connections were something her father had never taught her to navigate. "Earth to Elena!" She turned, startled, to find Lisa, her best friend and the gallery's assistant, standing by the counter with 2 cups of coffee. Lisa's flaming red hair seemed to light up the room, her freckled face breaking into a grin that Elena didn't feel like returning. "I got you a double shot of optimism," Lisa said, handing her the cup. "I figured you'd need it." "Thanks," Elena said, accepting it but not sipping. Her gaze flicked to the empty entrance. The morning sunlight streaming through the glass doors illuminated the dust motes in the air, but no footsteps crossed the threshold. Lisa leaned against the counter, studying her. "What's the plan, boss? Because if you're waiting for divine intervention, I hear those are on back order." "I'm working on it," Elena replied sharply, then softened. "Sorry, it's just, if I don't figure something out soon, this place is done." Lisa sighed, her humor slipping away. "You're not your dad, Elena. You can't keep carrying this weight alone. The art world's changed. People don't buy passion, they buy status. You need a new angle." "Like what?" Elena asked, genuinely exasperated. Lisa set her coffee down and pulled out her phone. "Dominic Rain." Elena frowned. "The Dominic Rain? The billionaire?" "The one and only," Lisa confirmed, scrolling. "He's like a shadow in the art world. Collects obsessively but never shows his face at auctions. His private collection is legendary. If you could get him to loan just one piece for an exclusive exhibition, this gallery could go from ghost town to VIP hotspot overnight." Elena crossed her arms. "And why would a man like that care about a dying gallery?" Lisa grinned slyly. "Because you're you. And because I already sent him a pitch," he replied. "You did what?" "He said to send a proposal." Elena blinked. The words sounded surreal, like someone had just told her she'd won the lottery. "He's considering it?" Lisa shrugged. "He's considering you. The gallery's in your name now, Elena. And maybe that's exactly what intrigues him. People love a good comeback story." Elena stared at her coffee, her thoughts swirling. Dominic Rain was notorious, not just for his wealth, but for the air of mystery around him. He was practically a myth in the art world. Stories about him ranged from outrageous to sinister. Some claimed he bought art as investments, hoarding masterpieces in underground vaults. Others whispered about the scandal that had made him retreat from public life altogether. "I don't know," Elena said finally. "What if he's just toying with us? Someone like him. He doesn't need to say yes to people like me." Lisa scoffed. "And that's exactly why you need to try. You've been walking on eggshells since your dad passed. You can't save this place by playing it safe." Elena sighed. Lisa wasn't wrong. Safe had gotten her nowhere. She turned and surveyed the gallery. The walls were lined with stunning pieces, some from established artists, others from rising stars, all hand-picked by her late father. It hurt to think about how much he'd believed in her in this place, and how badly she was failing. "All right," she said finally, her voice steadying. Send the proposal. Let's see if the myth is real. Lisa grinned, already tapping furiously on her phone. Now you're talking. As Elena turned back to the quiet gallery, the weight on her shoulders didn't feel any lighter. But for the first time in weeks, a spark of possibility flickered in the shadows. If Dominic Rain could help her breathe life into this place again, she'd take the risk. She just hoped she wouldn't regret it. The gallery door swung open at exactly 6 p.m., the brass chime jangling with an unexpected cheerfulness. Elena glanced up from the desk, where she'd been reviewing the final draft of the exhibition proposal. For a moment, her heart stopped. The man standing in the doorway didn't need an introduction. Dominic Rain's presence was as commanding as his reputation. Dressed in a sharp, tailored black suit with an open collar, he looked every bit the reclusive billionaire the tabloids loved to speculate about. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as though he'd stepped out of some glossy magazine spread. But it was his eyes, piercing, calculating, and unflinchingly direct, that pinned her in place. Elena Marks, I presume? His voice was deep, smooth, and unapologetically confident. Elena stood, smoothing her skirt as she tried to recover her composure. Mr. Rain, welcome to Mark's gallery. He stepped inside, his movements fluid and deliberate, as if he were assessing the space with every glance. The subtle scent of something clean and woodsy lingered in the air as he walked past her toward the nearest display. I've heard of your gallery, Dominic said, stopping before a marble sculpture. He tilted his head slightly, his tone neutral. Your father had an impeccable eye for talent. This piece, for example. It's bold, raw, almost reckless. Quite the statement. Elena forced herself to move, stepping out from behind the desk. It was one of his favorites, she said, her voice steady despite the nerves tightening in her chest. I'd like to think he'd approve of how we've carried on. Dominic turned to face her, one eyebrow raised as if to challenge that statement. That's debatable. The bluntness caught her off guard, and she bristled slightly. I assure you, Mr. Rain, we're still committed to showcasing meaningful art. A flicker of amusement danced across his face. You misunderstand me. It's not a critique. It's a question of scale. Passion only gets you so far in this world, Ms. Marks. What you need is power, influence, something I suspect you're not comfortable asking for. Yet. Elena's pulse quickened. He wasn't wrong, but the way he delivered his words felt like both a warning and an invitation. Let's cut to the chase, Dominic said, taking a step closer. I don't usually entertain proposals like yours. Collaboration isn't my style. Then why are you here? Elena shot back, her voice sharper than intended. For a brief moment, Dominic's gaze softened, but only slightly. Curiosity, he admitted. And perhaps potential. Before she could decipher his cryptic words, Dominic's attention shifted back to the gallery walls. He strolled leisurely past paintings and sculptures, his hands clasped behind his back. Elena followed, feeling a mix of irritation and intrigue. This exhibition you're proposing, Dominic began, stopping before a vibrant abstract painting. You want to feature pieces from my collection. Why should I agree? Elena hesitated, knowing this was the moment that would define everything. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, her confidence hard-won. Because this gallery was built on a foundation of passion and authenticity, she said, her voice unwavering. You said it yourself. My father had an eye for talent. This place isn't about catering to trends or pandering to egos. It's about art that speaks to people. Your collection could bring that message to life in a way no one else's could. Dominic studied her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, the silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken tension. Finally, he smiled. A slow, deliberate smile that made her feel like she'd just passed some unspoken test. You're quite persuasive, Ms. Marks. I'm persistent, Elena corrected. An admirable quality, he replied, turning to face her fully. Very well. I'll agree to your proposal, on one condition. Elena's relief was immediate, though it was tempered by caution. What's the condition? I want full control over the curation process, Dominic said. If my name is attached to this, it will be done on my terms. That includes approving the venue, the guest list, and every single piece displayed. Do we have an agreement? Elena's stomach churned. Giving Dominic that level of control felt risky, even reckless. But what choice did she have? The gallery's survival depended on this collaboration. Agreed, she said finally, extending her hand. Dominic took it, his grip firm and commanding. I'll have my team draw up the necessary contracts. In the meantime, I'll arrange for you to visit my collection. You'll need to see it firsthand to understand its potential. As he released her hand, their eyes locked. For a brief moment, the polished, enigmatic mask he wore seemed to crack, revealing something deeper, something raw and human. Until then, Ms. Marks, Dominic said, his voice softer now. He turned and walked out, leaving the gallery door swinging shut behind him. Elena stood there for several moments, her mind racing. Lisa emerged from the back office, her expression a mixture of awe and mischief. Was that Dominic Rain? Like, the Dominic Rain? Elena nodded, still staring at the door. Lisa let out a low whistle. Well, if you can't save this gallery, at least you've got a backup plan as the star of a billionaire romance novel. Elena rolled her eyes, but a small smile tugged at her lips. She wouldn't admit it, but for the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope, and maybe something more. 2 days later, Elena found herself standing in front of a sleek, glass-walled skyscraper in Manhattan's financial district, Dominic Rain's address. She adjusted the strap of her bag and took a deep breath before stepping into the marble-clad lobby. Everything about the building screamed luxury, from the polished floors to the concierge desk manned by impeccably dressed attendants. When she gave her name, the concierge gave a polite nod and gestured toward the private elevator. "He's expecting you," the man said. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Elena stepped inside, feeling the subtle hum of the ascent. The air seemed to thin as the numbers ticked higher, or maybe that was just her nerves. By the time the doors slid open, revealing the penthouse floor, she'd convinced herself that she was ready. The space was breathtaking. Walls of glass framed a panoramic view of the city skyline, while contemporary furniture in muted tones gave the room a minimalist elegance. But what truly captivated Elena was the art. Paintings, sculptures, and installations filled the penthouse, each piece more stunning than the last. Dominic's collection wasn't just impressive, it was a masterclass in taste and rarity. Pieces she'd only read about were here, displayed casually as if they weren't worth millions. Dominic was standing by a tall window, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He turned at the sound of her footsteps, his dark suit tailored to perfection. "Elena," he said, his voice smooth as velvet. "Welcome to my collection. It's extraordinary," she said, unable to hide her awe. He smiled faintly, gesturing for her to join him. "It's a labor of love, though I suspect you already know that feeling." Elena moved closer, her eyes flicking to a striking abstract painting nearby. "This piece, it's a Calderon. I thought it was lost after the auction in Paris." Dominic's smile deepened. "It was, until I found it." There was something almost possessive in the way he said it, and Elena felt a shiver run down her spine. "Let me show you something," Dominic said, setting his glass down. He walked toward a side room, motioning for her to follow. The smaller space was more intimate, its walls lined with pieces that felt deeply personal. Dominic stopped in front of a painting, an oil portrait of a woman with hauntingly beautiful eyes. "My mother," he said simply. Elena looked at the painting, noting the tenderness in the brushstrokes. "It's beautiful. She must have been remarkable." "She was," Dominic said, his voice tinged with something she couldn't quite place. Pain, maybe, or longing. "She loved art. She taught me to see it not just for what it is, but for what it means." Elena turned to him, surprised by the vulnerability in his tone. This wasn't the aloof billionaire she'd met 2 days ago. This was someone else entirely, someone who carried his past like a hidden weight. "Your collection reflects that," she said softly. "It's not just valuable, it's intimate." Dominic met her gaze, and for a moment, the world seemed to shrink. There was an intensity in his eyes that made her heart race. "You understand that," he said. "That's why I agreed to this partnership. Most people see art as a commodity. You see it as a story." Elena felt a flush rise to her cheeks, unsure how to respond. Before she could find the words, Dominic's phone buzzed on a nearby table, breaking the moment. "Excuse me," he said, stepping away to take the call. Elena exhaled, her pulse still racing as she turned back to the painting. She couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward Dominic, but she couldn't afford to get distracted. Not when so much was at stake. When Dominic returned, his expression was unreadable, the moment of vulnerability gone. "Let's discuss the exhibition," he said. "All business now." They spent the next hour reviewing potential pieces for the show. Dominic's input was precise, almost surgical, as he dissected each choice with a mix of passion and practicality. "This one stays," he said, pointing to a vibrant sculpture. "It's polarizing, and I like that. It'll draw people in." And this one? Elena asked, gesturing to a minimalist painting. Dominic frowned. Too safe. If we're going to save your gallery, we need to take risks. If you are enjoying the story, help us by subscribing to the channel. And please leave a comment to let us know what you're thinking about the story. This is of huge importance to us. Elena bristled slightly at the implication, but held her tongue. He wasn't wrong. By the time they finished, the sun was setting, casting the penthouse in a warm golden light. Dominic walked her to the elevator, his presence as magnetic as ever. You handled yourself well today, he said, a faint smile playing at his lips. Most people find me intimidating. Elena raised an eyebrow. Is that what you were going for? Dominic chuckled, a low, rich sound that sent a thrill through her. Perhaps. The elevator doors slid open and Elena stepped inside, turning to face him. Thank you for trusting me with this, she said. I won't let you down. Dominic's expression softened, his eyes lingering on hers. I don't doubt that, Elena. The doors closed, and as the elevator descended, Elena let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Dominic Rain was more than she'd expected. Brilliant, enigmatic, and utterly disarming. And though she tried to push the thought aside, she couldn't ignore the way her heart had skipped when he looked at her. This wasn't just business anymore. The morning after her visit to Dominic's penthouse, Elena arrived at the gallery with a fresh sense of determination. The exhibition plan was coming together faster than she'd anticipated, and for the first time in months, the prospect of saving her father's legacy didn't feel like a pipe dream. Lisa was already at the front desk, scrolling through emails. She looked up as Elena walked in, her face lighting up with a conspiratorial grin. Well, how was your little meeting with Mr. Tall, Dark, and Broody? Elena set her bag down with a roll of her eyes, though the heat rising in her cheeks betrayed her. It was productive, thank you. We finalized the list of pieces for the exhibition. Uh-huh, Lisa said, leaning her chin on her hand. And did you two happen to finalize anything else? Like, say, Sparks flying in his fancy penthouse? Lisa! What? The man is basically a walking romance novel. If you're not thinking about it, you're stronger than I am. Elena sighed, choosing to ignore the comment as she powered up her computer. We have more important things to focus on, like securing sponsorships and finalizing the guest list. Lisa shrugged but didn't press further, much to Elena's relief. As the morning wore on, Elena immersed herself in planning. She was halfway through drafting an email to a potential sponsor when the gallery door opened with an assertive jingle. Elena Marks, a voice said, smooth and self-assured. Elena looked up and froze. Marcus Bellamy stood in the doorway, his polished suit and perfectly combed hair practically screaming wealth and arrogance. He was an art dealer with a notorious reputation for ruthless deals and underhanded tactics. What are you doing here, Marcus? Elena asked, her tone cool. Marcus stepped inside, his gaze sweeping the gallery with a practiced air of condescension. Just checking in on my favorite underdog. I heard whispers about your little collaboration with Dominic Rain. Elena's stomach tightened, though she kept her expression neutral. Word travels fast. Oh, it always does in our world, Marcus said, his smile sharp. I just wanted to offer some friendly advice. Be careful with Rain. He's not as noble as he likes to appear. Thanks for the concern, Elena said, crossing her arms. But I'm capable of handling my own business. Marcus chuckled, a sound that made her skin crawl. I'm sure you think so, but Dominic Rain is dangerous. His involvement in the art world hasn't always been ethical. Elena's eyes narrowed. If you're here to spread gossip, I suggest you leave. I'm busy. Gossip? Marcus raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. Hardly. Did you know his family's investment firm played a role in the collapse of several small galleries a few years ago? Including one that had dealings with your father. The words hit like a punch to the gut. That's not true. Oh, it is, Marcus said, his tone almost gleeful. Dominic Rain's money isn't as clean as you'd like to believe, but don't take my word for it. Look into it yourself. I'd hate to see you caught in the fallout when the truth comes to light. Before Elena could respond, Marcus turned on his heel and strolled out, leaving a cloud of doubt in his wake. Lisa appeared at her side, her brow furrowed. What the hell was that about? Elena shook her head, trying to steady her breathing. Marcus being Marcus. He's just trying to get under my skin. Did it work? Elena hesitated. No. Maybe. I don't know. Lisa crossed her arms, her expression serious for once. You're not actually going to believe anything that snake said, are you? I don't want to, Elena admitted. But what if he's right? What if Dominic isn't who he seems? Lisa sighed, her fiery spirit dimmed by concern. Then you need to find out the truth. But don't let Marcus Bellamy of all people plant seeds of doubt in your head. That man thrives on chaos. Elena nodded, though her mind was already racing. That evening, after hours of research that turned up nothing concrete, Elena decided to confront Dominic directly. She called his assistant and arranged a meeting at his penthouse. When Dominic opened the door, he looked surprised to see her, though his composure quickly returned. "Elena," he said, stepping aside to let her in. "This is unexpected." "I need to ask you something," she said, her tone brisk. Dominic frowned but gestured for her to sit. "Go on." She remained standing, her arms crossed. "Is it true that your firm was involved in the collapse of smaller galleries? Galleries like my father's?" His expression hardened, his jaw tightening. "Where did you hear that?" "It doesn't matter. Just tell me if it's true." For a moment, Dominic said nothing. The silence stretched between them, heavy with tension. Finally, he exhaled, his shoulders sagging slightly. "There's truth to it," he admitted, "but not in the way you think." Elena's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "It means," Dominic said, his voice low, "that my family's investment firm made decisions that hurt people like your father. But I wasn't involved in those decisions. In fact, I tried to stop them." Elena searched his face, looking for any sign of deception. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I knew it would complicate things," Dominic said, his tone tinged with regret. "And because I've spent years trying to make amends for the damage my family caused." Elena turned away, her thoughts a whirlwind. She wanted to believe him, but Marcus's words still lingered in the back of her mind. "I need time to process this," she said finally. Dominic nodded, his expression unreadable. "Take all the time you need. But know this, I would never intentionally hurt you or your gallery. That's not who I am." As she left the penthouse, Elena's heart felt heavier than ever. The man she was beginning to trust had secrets. Secrets that could either destroy everything or bring them closer together. The Amalfi Coast didn't look real. Elena stood on the terrace of Dominic's villa, gazing out at the vast expanse of turquoise sea framed by jagged cliffs and lush greenery. The air smelled of salt and lemon blossoms, and the late afternoon sun bathed everything in golden light. It was a scene plucked from a postcard, but it couldn't distract her from the knot of tension in her chest. The trip had been Dominic's idea, pitched as an opportunity to finalize their exhibition plans while escaping the chaos of the city. He'd invited her to see some pieces stored in his Italian estate, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to access rare works that could elevate the event's prestige. But the unresolved questions about his past still lingered in Elena's mind, and she wasn't sure if she'd come to find inspiration or answers. Dominic appeared beside her, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, the casual look doing little to soften the intensity he seemed to carry everywhere he went. "It's breathtaking, isn't it?" he said, handing her a glass. "It's beautiful," Elena replied, her voice quieter than she intended. Dominic studied her for a moment before turning to the view. "I've always found this place grounding. It reminds me that there's more to life than skyscrapers and stock portfolios." Elena took a sip of champagne, letting the bubbles tickle her throat. "Do you come here often?" "Not as often as I should," he admitted. "This villa was my mother's favorite retreat. After she passed, I avoided it for years." Elena glanced at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. "Why now?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe I've finally learned that running from the past doesn't erase it." Her chest tightened at his words. She knew what it was like to carry the weight of the past, to feel its shadow stretching into the present. But unlike Dominic, she wasn't sure she was ready to face it. They fell into a companionable silence, the sound of waves crashing against the cliffs filling the space between them. The tour of the villa began an hour later. Dominic led her through its halls, which were lined with works that would have made the most seasoned curators weep. From Renaissance masterpieces to contemporary sculptures, the collection was a testament to both his wealth and his impeccable taste. "This piece," Dominic said, stopping in front of a vivid abstract painting, "is by an artist your father admired. He was one of the first to recognize her potential." Elena's breath caught as she studied the painting. "I remember this. He hung her early work in the gallery years ago. She came to one of our openings. She told me my father believed in her when no one else did." Dominic's expression softened. That's the kind of man he was, wasn't he? Someone who saw what others couldn't. Elena nodded, her throat tightening. He believed art was more than a product. It was a connection, a reflection of the human experience. That's why losing the gallery feels like losing him all over again. Dominic stepped closer, his voice low. You won't lose it, Elena. Not while I'm here. She looked up at him, her heart pounding. For a moment, she let herself believe him, let herself imagine a future where the gallery thrived again. But the doubts Marcus had planted still lurked in the back of her mind. Why are you doing this, Dominic? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. His gaze didn't waver. Because I see the same passion in you that your father had, and because I know what it's like to lose something you love. The sincerity in his words was disarming, but Elena couldn't shake the feeling that there was more he wasn't telling her. That evening, they dined on the terrace, the table set with an array of Italian dishes that looked as though they belonged in a magazine spread. The wine flowed freely, and for the first time in weeks, Elena felt herself begin to relax. Dominic was different here, she realized. Away from the city and its endless demands, he seemed lighter, more at ease. He told her stories about his travels, his voice animated as he described a near miss with a mischievous goat in the Swiss Alps. Elena found herself laughing, the sound surprising her. You have a beautiful laugh, Dominic said, his tone soft. Elena felt a blush creep up her cheeks. I don't do it often enough. Then I'll have to make it my mission to change that, he replied, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Their gazes lingered, the air between them charged. Elena's heart raced as Dominic reached across the table, his fingers brushing against hers. You're remarkable, Elena, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Her breath hitched, but before she could respond, a breeze swept through the terrace, rattling the wine glasses and breaking the moment. Elena pulled her hand away, suddenly feeling exposed. It's getting late, she said, standing. I should get some rest. Dominic's expression flickered with something she couldn't quite read. Disappointment, maybe. But he nodded. Of course. Good night, Elena. Good night, she replied, retreating to her room. Elena closed the door behind her, leaning against it as she tried to steady her racing heart. The villa was quiet now, the hum of the sea the only sound. She moved to the window, gazing out at the moonlit cliffs. She wanted to trust Dominic, to believe in his intentions, but trust was dangerous, and she'd learned the hard way not to give it freely. Still, as she lay in bed that night, her thoughts kept returning to the way he'd looked at her, the way his words had made her feel, seen, understood, even cherished. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder, what if? The glow of the Amalfi Coast lingered with Elena like an unshakable dream as she returned to New York. The days at Dominic's villa had been a whirlwind of beauty and discovery, and though she'd left with an unspoken tension between them, she couldn't deny the connection they had shared. But back in the gallery, reality greeted her with cold clarity. Bills still piled up, and the weight of Marcus Bellamy's accusations hung in the air like a storm cloud. Lisa was the first to sense her unease. So, Lisa began, setting down her latte. What's bothering you now? I know that face. That's your something's eating me alive but I won't admit it face. Elena sighed, tapping a pen against her desk. It's just Marcus. Lisa groaned. Ugh, are we still letting that snake live rent-free in your head? What's he done now? Nothing new, Elena admitted. It's just that what he said about Dominic, it's still bothering me. I want to believe Dominic, but Marcus planted the seed, and now I can't stop questioning everything. Lisa folded her arms, leaning forward. Okay, let's play devil's advocate. Have you seen anything at all that suggests Dominic's lying? Elena hesitated. No, but what if I haven't been looking hard enough? What if I've been too caught up in other things? Lisa arched an eyebrow. Other things like his smoldering eyes and jawline that could cut glass? Lisa. Fine, Lisa said, throwing up her hands. Look, if it's really eating at you, do your research. But don't let Marcus Bellamy be the reason you sabotage a partnership, or something more with Dominic. Elena nodded, though Lisa's words didn't fully quiet the doubts swirling in her mind. Elena's chance to dig deeper came sooner than she expected. Later that afternoon, she received a message from Marcus himself. Meet me at the Sterling at 6 p.m. You'll want to hear this. The Sterling was a swanky hotel bar frequented by New York's elite, and the invitation felt ominous. Against her better judgment, she decided to go. When she arrived, Marcus was already seated in a corner booth, a glass of red wine in his hand. He smiled as she approached, though the gleam in his eyes was anything but friendly. Elena, he said smoothly, standing to pull out her chair. Thank you for coming. She sat, her posture stiff. Let's get to the point, Marcus. What do you want? Straight to business. I like that, Marcus said, taking a sip of his wine. You're here because I care about you, and because I think you deserve to know who you're dealing with. Elena folded her arms, unimpressed. Save the theatrics, Marcus. If you have something to say, say it. He slid a folder across the table. Take a look. Elena hesitated before opening it. Inside were documents, financial records, emails, and meeting transcripts, all pointing to Dominic Rain's involvement in the collapse of several small galleries, including her father's. Her chest tightened as she scanned the pages. The dates and signatures were there, clear as day. Dominic's name appeared again and again, tied to decisions that had led to financial ruin for countless artists and curators. This can't be real, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Oh, it's real, Marcus said, his tone dripping with faux sympathy. Dominic Rain isn't the savior you think he is. He's a predator, and you're his next meal. Elena's hands trembled as she closed the folder. Why are you showing me this? Because I don't want to see you get hurt, Marcus said, leaning closer. You're talented, Elena, passionate. You deserve better than to be another casualty of Dominic's games. She stood abruptly, clutching the folder to her chest. I'll need time to verify this. Of course, Marcus said, leaning back with a smirk. Take all the time you need. Elena left the bar, her mind a whirlwind of anger and confusion. That evening, she called Dominic. Is everything all right? Dominic asked when he picked up. I need to see you, Elena said, her voice shaking. Now, come to my place, he said, concern lacing his tone. When she arrived at his penthouse, Dominic greeted her at the door, his expression guarded. What's going on? Elena stepped inside, dropping the folder onto the coffee table. Care to explain this? Dominic opened the folder and scanned the contents. His jaw tightened, but he remained calm. Where did you get this? Does it matter? Elena snapped. Are these documents real or not? They're real, Dominic admitted, his voice steady. Her heart sank. So it's true. You were part of the reason my father's gallery, and so many others, collapsed. It's not as simple as that, Dominic said, his tone firm. Yes, my family's firm made decisions that hurt people, but I wasn't behind them. I fought against those decisions. That's why I left the company. Then why didn't you tell me? Elena demanded, tears stinging her eyes. Because I knew you'd look at me like you're looking at me now, Dominic said, his voice breaking slightly. Like I'm the enemy. I trusted you, Elena said, her voice trembling. I thought you believed in me, in this gallery. Was that all just part of your redemption tour? No, Dominic said, stepping closer. Elena, everything I've done has been for you, to help you, to make amends for the mistakes of my past. If I could undo the damage my family caused, I would, but I can't. All I can do is try to make things right now. Elena turned away, her chest heaving with emotion. I care about you, Elena, Dominic said softly. More than I should. That's why this matters to me. You matter to me. She looked back at him, her heart torn between anger and longing. I need time to think. Dominic nodded, his eyes filled with pain. Take all the time you need. As she left the penthouse, the weight of the folder in her hand felt heavier than ever. The night of the exhibition arrived with all the pomp and pressure Elena had anticipated, and then some. The gallery was transformed into a glimmering oasis of creativity and elegance. Spotlights illuminated the curated pieces, casting long shadows and drawing gasps of admiration from the elite crowd trickling in. Elena adjusted her midnight blue dress, her heart pounding in time with the music playing softly in the background. Every detail, every decision, had led to this moment, yet the turmoil inside her made it impossible to feel triumph. Dominic Rain hadn't contacted her since their last conversation, leaving her in a haze of doubt and unresolved feelings. The documents Marcus had shown her had been verified, but so had Dominic's efforts to distance himself from his family's dealings. She was no closer to deciding if she could forgive him or trust him. Elena, Lisa's voice cut through her thoughts. The guest list is a who's who of Manhattan royalty. Did you see who just walked in? Regina Carlton. The Regina Carlton. Lisa clutched Elena's arm, her excitement palpable. She runs the Carlton Arts Foundation. If she's impressed, this could put the gallery back on the map permanently. Elena forced a smile. Let's hope she likes what she sees. Lisa frowned, her perceptive gaze narrowing. Are you okay? You've been off. I'm fine, Elena lied. Just nervous. Lisa didn't look convinced, but before she could press further, a deep voice from behind interrupted. Ms. Marks. Elena turned, and her breath caught. Dominic stood there, impossibly composed in a black tuxedo, his presence commanding the room despite the crowd. Dominic, she said, her voice betraying the mix of emotions swirling inside her. He inclined his head slightly. You've outdone yourself. The gallery looks stunning. Thank you, Elena said, her tone formal. I'm glad you could make it. Dominic's eyes searched hers, as if trying to decipher the walls she'd hastily constructed. This night is about you, Elena, and your father's legacy. Remember that. Before she could respond, a burst of laughter drew Dominic's attention. Marcus Bellamy had entered the gallery, flanked by a group of equally smug socialites. Dominic's jaw tightened, his gaze darkening. I see our friend has decided to make an appearance. Elena followed his gaze, her stomach sinking. Marcus's presence was a calculated move. She was sure of it. Don't let him ruin this night, Dominic said, his voice low. Easier said than done, Elena thought as Marcus caught sight of them and sauntered over, a glass of champagne in hand. Well, well, Marcus drawled, his smile sharp. What a delightful evening, and what a stunning host. Elena forced a polite smile. Marcus, I didn't expect to see you here. Oh, I wouldn't miss it, he said smoothly, his gaze flicking to Dominic. Especially when the competition is so entertaining. Dominic's expression remained impassive, but there was an unmistakable tension in his posture. Enjoy the exhibition, Elena said pointedly, cutting off whatever jab Marcus was about to make. Marcus raised his glass in a mock toast. Oh, I intend to. As he walked away, Dominic turned to Elena. He's here to stir up trouble. I know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic hesitated, then placed a hand on her arm. If he tries anything, I'll handle it. Focus on your guests. This is your moment. Elena nodded, though the knot in her stomach refused to loosen. The evening progressed in a blur of introductions, compliments, and thinly veiled networking. Guests marveled at the pieces on display, their admiration reaffirming Elena's belief in the power of art to move people. But even as she engaged with the crowd, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She caught Marcus observing her more than once, his smile smug and knowing. When the time came for Elena's speech, she stood before the crowd, the weight of their attention pressing down on her. Thank you all for being here tonight, she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. This exhibition is a celebration of art's ability to connect us, to reflect our shared experiences, and to inspire us to see the world differently. She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. It's also a tribute to my father, who believed that art isn't just something we hang on walls, it's something we carry with us, in our hearts and in our lives. The crowd erupted in applause, and for a moment, Elena felt the weight lift. Juldwaya. As the night wound down, Marcus approached her, his smirk firmly in place. Congratulations, Elena, he said. Quite the turnout. Thank you, she said coolly, wishing he would leave. But I have to wonder, Marcus continued, his tone dripping with false concern. How many of these people would still be here if they knew the truth about Dominic Rain? Elena stiffened. What are you talking about? Oh, you haven't told them? Marcus said, feigning surprise. I assumed you'd want to share the fascinating history of your benefactor. Dominic appeared at her side, his voice calm but firm. That's enough, Marcus. Ah, the man of the hour, Marcus said, turning to face him. Always swooping in to play the hero. You've made your point, Dominic said, his tone laced with warning. Now leave. Marcus's smirk widened. Gladly. But be careful, Dominic. Secrets have a way of coming to light. As Marcus walked away, Elena let out a shaky breath. Are you all right? Dominic asked, his concern evident. I'm fine, she said, though the tension in her chest said otherwise. Elena, Dominic said, his voice softer now. Don't let him get to you. He thrives on manipulation. She met his gaze, the sincerity in his eyes cutting through her doubt. For the first time that night, she felt a flicker of hope. Thank you, she said quietly. Dominic's lips curved into a faint smile. For you, always. The gallery was empty now, save for the faint echo of Elena's heels as she walked through the space. The last of the guests had gone, and Lisa was busy locking up. The evening had been a triumph on the surface, an exhibition that rekindled the gallery's reputation and reignited her father's legacy. But Elena's heart was far from light. The weight of unanswered questions and unresolved feelings bore down on her, pressing into every quiet corner of the gallery. Elena, Dominic's voice came from behind her. She turned to see him standing in the doorway of the main hall, his tie loosened and his expression hesitant. This wasn't the confident, composed man who had charmed the room earlier. This was someone raw, someone carrying a burden as heavy as hers. "Dominic," she said, her voice soft but guarded. "I didn't want to leave without talking to you," he said, stepping closer. "I know tonight was important, and I didn't want to overshadow that, but I need you to hear me out." Elena folded her arms, bracing herself. "I'm listening." Dominic took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "Everything Marcus said about my family's business was true, and for years, I've carried the guilt of knowing that people like your father suffered because of decisions made in those boardrooms." "Then why didn't you tell me sooner?" Elena asked, her voice trembling. "You could have been honest with me, Dominic. Instead, I had to hear it from Marcus." "I didn't tell you because I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid that you'd see me as one of them, as someone who values profit over people. That's not who I am, Elena. It's why I walked away from that life. But walking away doesn't erase the damage that was done." Elena's throat tightened, her emotions swirling. "Do you have any idea what it felt like to find out my father's gallery was collateral damage? To know that your name was tied to the very thing I've been fighting to save?" "I do," Dominic said, his voice filled with anguish. "And that's why I've spent every moment since trying to make amends. Partnering with you wasn't just about the gallery, Elena. It was about honoring what your father stood for. I wanted to help you because I believe in what you're doing, and because I care about you more than I should." His words hung in the air, raw and unguarded. Elena looked away, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know if I can trust you, Dominic. I don't know if I can separate who you are now from what your past represents." "I understand," he said quietly. "But trust isn't about perfection. It's about believing in someone's intentions, even when the past is messy. I can't change what happened, but I can promise you this. I will never lie to you again, and I will do everything in my power to earn your trust, however long it takes." The sincerity in his voice broke through the walls she'd built, and for a moment, she let herself feel the depth of his remorse. "You should have told me the truth from the beginning," she said, her tone softer now. "I know," he said, stepping closer, "and I regret that every day. But I'm here now, Elena, and I'll fight for this. Fight for you, if you let me." Her heart ached with the weight of her decision. She could walk away, shield herself from the risk of pain and betrayal, or she could take a chance on the man standing before her, a man who had made mistakes but who seemed determined to prove he was more than his past. Elena met his gaze, searching for something, anything, that would make her decision clearer. What she found was a raw vulnerability that mirrored her own. "I need time," she said finally, her voice steady but soft. Dominic nodded, his expression filled with quiet resolve. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here." For the first time that night, Elena felt a flicker of hope, not just for the gallery, but for something more. The gallery was alive with the hum of possibility. It had been a week since the exhibition, and the renewed energy surrounding the space was palpable. Emails from prospective buyers flooded Elena's inbox, and sponsorship offers were finally within reach. Yet, as much as the gallery seemed poised for a rebirth, Elena couldn't shake the lingering ache of uncertainty. Dominic had kept his promise to give her space, staying out of sight but not out of her mind. She had replayed his words over and over, grappling with the complexity of his past and the sincerity of his present. Today, she found herself standing in front of Horizon of Dreams, her father's favorite painting. The bold brushstrokes seemed to echo her own struggles, chaotic yet purposeful, filled with shadows but brimming with light. "You always knew how to find beauty in the chaos," she whispered, thinking of her father. "I wish I could do the same." As if summoned by the thought, the gallery door opened, and Dominic stepped inside. He carried a small box in his hands, his expression hesitant, yet hopeful. "Elena," he said, his voice breaking the stillness. She turned, her heart skipping at the sight of him. "Dominic, I wasn't expecting you." "I know," he said, walking toward her. "But I wanted to give you something, to show you that my intentions go beyond words." He held out the box, its black ribbon tied with meticulous care. "What is it?" she asked, taking it hesitantly. "Open it," he urged. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a framed photograph, a faded black and white image of a young woman standing in front of a modest gallery. Her smile was warm, her eyes filled with the kind of passion that could only come from creating something meaningful. Elena's breath caught. "Is this your mother?" Dominic nodded. "She opened her own gallery when she was younger. It wasn't big or glamorous, but it was hers. She believed in art the way your father did, fiercely, unapologetically. That's why I care about this place, Elena. It reminds me of her. Elena's fingers tightened around the frame as a wave of emotion swept through her. Dominic, He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. I'm not asking you to forget what my past represents, but I'm asking you to believe in who I am now. I want to help you carry this legacy, not because I feel guilty, but because I believe in you. Tears blurred her vision, but she refused to let them fall. You make it so hard to stay mad at you, she said, her voice trembling. Dominic smiled faintly. That's the idea. They stood in silence for a moment, the unspoken tension between them dissolving like morning mist. I've been thinking a lot, Elena said finally, about trust, about risk, and I realized something. If I keep holding on to fear, I'll never let myself move forward. Not with the gallery and not with us. Dominic's eyes softened, the vulnerability in his gaze mirroring her own. Does that mean? It means I'm willing to try, she interrupted, her voice firm. But I need us to be honest with each other. No more secrets, no more half-truths. Always, Dominic said, his tone reverent. He reached for her hand, and when she didn't pull away, a smile broke across his face. For the first time in what felt like forever, Elena allowed herself to lean into the possibility of something more. The walls she had so carefully built began to crumble, replaced by a tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry everything alone. Dominic squeezed her hand gently, his voice breaking the silence. You're remarkable, Elena, and whatever happens, I'm here. For you, for this gallery, for everything. Elena smiled, a small but genuine curve of her lips. Then let's see where this goes. Sunlight streamed through the gallery's tall windows, casting golden rays across the polished floors and vibrant artworks. The space was alive again, not just with patrons, but with purpose. Elena stood in the center, watching as a group of visitors admired one of the featured pieces from Dominic's collection. Their voices hummed with excitement, their awe tangible. It had been a month since the exhibition, and the gallery had transformed into a hub of activity. New artists had reached out, eager to showcase their work, and sales had begun to stabilize the once precarious finances. For the first time in years, Elena felt a sense of hope she hadn't known she was missing. Busy morning already, Lisa said, appearing beside her with a clipboard in hand. Isn't it great? Elena replied, her smile brighter than it had been in a long time. Lisa smirked. It's amazing. And you know what else is amazing? You. Elena raised an eyebrow. What are you talking about? You, boss, Lisa said, nudging her playfully. Look at what you've done. You turned this place around. Your dad would be so proud. Warmth spread through Elena's chest. I couldn't have done it alone. And speaking of someone who helped, Lisa said, glancing toward the gallery entrance. Elena turned, her breath catching as Dominic stepped inside. He looked effortlessly composed, as always, his presence commanding yet warm. In his hand, he carried a small bouquet of white roses. Lisa grinned. I'll leave you two to whatever this is. As Lisa walked off, Dominic approached, his lips curving into a soft smile. Elena. Dominic, she replied, her heart skipping at the way his name sounded on her lips. These are for you, he said, holding out the bouquet. She accepted them, her fingers brushing against his. Thank you. They're beautiful. So is this place, he said, gesturing to the bustling gallery around them. You've brought it back to life. We've brought it back, Elena corrected, meeting his gaze. Dominic's smile deepened. Fair enough. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the energy of the gallery buzzing around them. So, what's next? He asked finally. Elena exhaled, her mind spinning with possibilities. There's so much more I want to do, more exhibitions, more collaborations. But right now, I'm just grateful for this, for everything. Dominic reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His touch was light, but it sent a thrill through her. You should be proud of yourself. You've built something extraordinary here. She looked up at him, her emotions shimmering just beneath the surface. I didn't think I could do it. Not without my dad. You didn't do it without him, Dominic said gently. He's in every decision you make, every piece you hang on these walls. This gallery is as much his legacy as it is yours. Tears pricked at her eyes, but they were tears of gratitude, of healing. And what about you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Where do you fit in this? Dominic smiled. his expression filled with a quiet intensity. "Wherever you'll let me." Elena's heart swelled as she looked at him, the man who had challenged her, supported her, and made her believe in herself again. For so long, she had been afraid to let anyone in, afraid of losing herself in the process. But with Dominic, it felt different. It felt like growth, like possibility. "Then stay," she said, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "Be a part of this. Always," Dominic replied, his hand finding hers. As their fingers intertwined, Elena felt a surge of certainty. The gallery, her father's legacy, her own dreams, it was all falling into place. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that she didn't have to face the future alone. Together, they stepped toward the bustling gallery, ready to embrace whatever came next. If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel. Your subscription will show that I'm on the right path to bring you the best videos ever. Check this video out too. This billionaire heiress faked her own kidnapping, but here's the crazy part. She thought she'd escape her father's control with a staged abduction, but when real rebels hijacked her fake plan, everything spiraled out of control.